This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 220 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is Private Internet Access. If you've ever surfed the web and wanted to do it securely, especially when you're traveling or using someone else's network, you definitely need private internet access. Private internet access allows you to have a secure VPN without them logging what data what you're doing, what transactions you're making, or anything like that, to connect to anywhere in the world. You can also change your default location so it appears as if you're coming from a different place. Why is this helpful, you say? If you're not doing anything nefarious, well, it's really helpful if you want to test DNS resolution from different places and different time zones. It's a really cool tool, and it's not very expensive at all. You can get plans starting at $3.99 a month, and you can find out more by going to geekleader.com/VPN. Again, that's geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got a returning guest, Scott Drake. You may remember him from episode 57, a good 150 plus episodes ago. But he is the founder and executive director of Jump Coach, which is new because he was not the founder and executive director of Jump Coach the last time we talked to him. He was the vice president of technology for a medical education company called ScholarRx, which we're going to talk a little bit about that. But mostly we want to find out what's new with Scott's life and what he's working on today and how he can help us become better leaders. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, John. It's good to see you again.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about kind of what you've been doing and for all the new listeners, kind of who you are and what your journey has been like.
Yeah, so my background is in tech as a technologist. I started my career in the mid '90s as a programmer. Got into the very, very, very early days of web. Taught myself. I'm a completely self-taught technologist. Was one of the few people in the early days doing JavaScript, and that got me recruited out to Microsoft when there was really nobody else doing JavaScript. So I spent a bit of time out at Microsoft and came back to Kentucky, which is where I'm from. And then my boss from Microsoft ended up recruiting me to a startup out in California. So I went to Silicon Valley for a little while and then Kentucky. So so my background is definitely in tech. And eventually, I kind of said, hey, I want to do more than I can with my own two hands. I want to grow. And started taking on leadership positions. And like most people, I made every mistake in the book as I was kind of coming up the ranks. And, about 5 to 8 years ago, started looking for ways to, how do we make this easier for the next generation of leaders coming behind us? Because it took me a good decade, right? It took me a good decade to be confident and really feel good about what I was doing. Kind of ran my own company for a while and then, worked with a couple of other companies and ended up in an executive role. And I left that about 3 months ago to focus full time on coaching and training and growing that next generation of leaders.
So what helped drive that decision for you? Like, you want to help people, obviously you want to grow people, you want to do that. But what was that like one experience in your life that triggered you to say like leadership is it? Do you have a story? Do you have one of those like moments that you can recall that was kind of like the trigger point that makes you think like, yeah, this is what I want to focus on because this is more important than JavaScript or whatever at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it came down to part of it was I kind of felt like I had done with technology what I could do. Right, the technology was going to change, but the kind of problems I was solving day to day weren't going to change that much. You can go to different industries, you can learn new technologies, you can do some different stuff like that. But I felt like I'd kind of tapped out my potential as a technologist. One of the things I love to say is that computers are rational. They kind of do what you expect. People are not rational, right? So there's different kind of challenges with people because they don't always, respond as you expect them to respond and do what you expect them to do. So it's just a completely different type of challenge when you start looking at the people side of things than when you're dealing with the tech side of things. So I think for me, it was just needing a new challenge and wanting to have a bigger impact. So I think those were probably the two biggest drivers.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. I know, you kind of feel like although the tech's changing, you still got the same responsibilities, right? You still got the same goals, the same thing. And a lot of that does revolve around people. I know for me, when you said this earlier on, you wanted to grow by scaling out, and you can't really do that if you're limiting yourself to one thing that you're doing. That gets into leadership. Now, one thing you said that it took you like a good bit of time to really get confident in that leadership aspect and management and kind of that role, how can you recommend like new leaders to become confident? Because and for me, being a developer, I got promoted into leading a team of developers, and all of a sudden my peers were now reporting to me, and it was weird. It was awkward, and I didn't know exactly what to do except for just try to work harder and maybe not smarter. But what are some things that some new leaders can do? Maybe you're a new manager at a new company, or maybe just got promoted to become more confident in your abilities.
Well, so I think there are a couple of the biggest source of confusion, and that kind of hurts confidence, is it's a really, really big job that isn't very well organized, right? So it's kind of like, imagine you're going to go to Disney World and nobody gives you a map, right? Or you're going to go travel to New York City and nobody gives you a map and you have no idea what you can do or what you might do or what you need to do. Or you might be doing everything you need to do, but because there isn't this roadmap, there isn't this clear definition of what leadership is, then it's hard. Even if you're doing a great job, it's hard to be confident that you're doing a great job, right? So it took me a good decade to trust that I had gone into all the nooks and crannies, and that I could see that my team was getting good results, and I could see that my team was healthy and engaged and responding well, and low turnovers and some of those pieces. So it took me a while, but then once I kind of got started in studying and some of the research I did for Jump Coach, we've actually built a scorecard. We've built mechanisms, which is essentially what I call the map and the compass, that we can hand to new leaders, and we can say, here's a map of New York City. Here's every place you could go, right? You don't need to go every place here. You don't need to master all of these pieces, but you at least need to be aware of them. And if you can kind of get to a point that you've covered enough of these bases, then it will give you the confidence. It will help you become more confident that you're at least doing the things that you should be doing.
So what is Jump Coach exactly? I know that's your new startup.
Yeah.
What are your goals and your why behind that? And what exactly is it? And how would I use that as a
Sure.
leader?
So Jump Coach is a social enterprise, and its mission is to make best-in-class leadership training available to anyone who needs it. When I was here a few years ago, I was working on a similar project called LearnLeadership.org, and its goal again was to make essentially, how do we put the right training in front of this next generation of leaders? And that wasn't the right mechanism. I kind of worked on that for a few years, and that was a little bit. That's a good way to put it. It kind of stretched me in the areas of leadership that maybe I wasn't ready for, right? I was trying to really build a community up around helping solve this problem, and I wasn't quite ready to do that yet. So, what we've done at Jump Coach is we put together just 3 core lessons that are available on a pay-what-you-can basis. They're not, again, it's intended to really be accessible to anyone who needs it. They're lunch size, short form, but they really walk people through the kind of the transformation people need to make when they go from a role player to a leader. What's the mindset change? They kind of introduce a scorecard so people can become more confident more quickly, and they know the nooks and crannies. And then it gives them a toolbox that they can get better over time. So it's that one piece of training that I wish I had when I first started, right? It's how, you can go through it in 3 days or in 3 months or in, 9 months, but over a course of a short period of time, you can really kind of get your arms around leadership and then build on that, right? It gives you that foundational piece. So that's really my goal for it. And it's to just give people a simpler place to start, right? It's just to end that confusion around, what is this? And is it for me? And do I want it? So that's really what the goal is for it.
So would you say, I know for me in my career, it's like I got to a crossroads where I had to say, do I want to be a superstar individual contributor the rest of my career, or do I want to, die a little bit or kill a little bit of my tech skills and move into leadership? Because I didn't have the capability of really doing both, are doing both very well. I had to kind of pick one. Would you say that's the case with most leaders? Do they have to make that decision? And is this course kind of going to help them decide if this is right for them or not?
I don't think so. I think number one, I think everybody needs basic leadership skills.
I agree. Yeah.
Everybody, right? If you're 3 years into your career, if you're 3 months into your career, right, you will find yourself in situations where you need to work through others to get things done, right? That's what leadership is. That's my basic definition of leadership, is you're working through somebody else to get something done. And even if you're an expert, right, you can find ways to carve off pieces and let other people help you, right? But the biggest challenge that leaders have is shutting off that expert brain of wanting to have all the answers, wanting the team to do things exactly their way, and still giving the team the autonomy and freedom to help them.
Mhm.
And, you want to motivate a team, right? You want a team that's happy, but what motivates a team and what makes a team happy is having that autonomy and freedom. And if you're operating from that expert brain, you often don't give them that freedom. So it can be hard to do both. You have to be really conscious about when you're the expert and when you're the one solving problems versus when you're going to be the leader and let other people solve problems and help you. You can do it, but it's hard.
Mhm.
And it's really where most people trip up. Most people they don't want to detach their ego from being the expert, right? And attach their ego to working through others.
Yeah.
And that's where that's really the trip up point. And there's actually some psychology behind it, which is what I've dug into and what I've found. And really the basis of our first lesson is around that psychology that helps people understand what are those different ways of thinking they need to adopt, right? To be able to either balance the two and continue to do both jobs, or to completely make that shift and say, I want to be a leader more than I want to be the expert programmer or accountant or whatever it is that they're an expert at.
Yeah, but isn't it true? Like I know for me, it was almost like, if you want to get, if we're giving you the opportunity to be a manager. If you want to be a manager, you have to put this stuff behind. And that was kind of one of those decisions I had to make as at the company I was at, because we didn't have the ability to really do both. Now, I still carved out a section, and I still do it today. I have what I call Fun Day Fridays, which are going to be my day that I don't have any meetings on my calendar. You're not going to get a meeting on my calendar on Friday. I'm going to play with code. I'm going to do something that keeps my technical skills a little bit, there, but it can't be my full-time gig anymore. Do you see that as a common thing in companies, or is it kind of a dying way of businesses doing things?
Well, so I don't think you can be a great manager and be a great programmer, right? I think if you want to be a manager, you need to go focus on being a manager. And this is where I want to differentiate leadership versus management a little bit as well, right? I think everybody needs the ability to work through others to get things done and to lead, right? And there's a certain skill set that's required to do that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be a manager, then you have a lot more to learn. If you want to be a mid-level manager, you have one set of things to learn. If you want to be an executive, you have another whole set of things to learn. If you want to be an entrepreneur or start a nonprofit or do something like that, you have a whole nother things, so you can only learn so much. Like you can only master so many skills. And you do eventually have to kind of make that decision. It would be very hard to be an executive, making strategic decisions, doing those kinds of things, running a business, and also trying to stay on top of technology. That's part of why I don't do a whole lot of tech anymore. I've got some Python books over my shoulder. I poke around and play around because I enjoy it kind of as a hobby. But to keep up with the learning that's required in tech anymore, it would be really hard to learn what you need as a leader and learn what you need in tech and be really great at both.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that's kind of where, I feel like to be a good leader, I need to be aware of what's going on, but I can't be as focused as I used to be. I can't be writing code every day.
Yeah, no, what I want to know is what are the types of challenges that this team faces, right? And that's helpful, like when you come out of a programming background, like you understand the types of problems and challenges that team is going to face. You can ask better questions, but you even hit a point where it's like, I'm managing project managers. Technically, I was never a project manager. I'm managing data scientists. I don't really understand that, right? So it's a little bit easier to manage in areas where you had some domain expertise because the challenges. But yeah, you even get in the issues where you're managing stuff you're not as familiar with. So it is a different skill set. It's a different mindset, and it's you're never done learning, right?
Yeah.
In either job, you're never done learning. Like as a leader, you're learning for life. You're always going to be learning, and tech is the same way. So yeah, it's hard to do both.
Yeah. So I was checking out your leadership scorecard that you mentioned earlier on your site. One of the things that I've noticed in there that's frequently is that you have a growth mindset.
Yep.
What does a growth mindset mean to you, and how can one kind of cultivate and continue to have that? Because let me just preface this by, for me, sometimes after a certain period of time doing one role, you get a little you plateau a little bit, right? And you feel like you fall into this trap of, well, that's just the way we do it around here. And you get that fixed kind of mindset that kind of encroaches on you. How do you keep that growth mindset fresh?
Well, I think fresh challenges help. Fresh challenges help. It's people want growth. Like if you look at what are the core foundations of management, or not management, of employee motivation, just your own self-motivation, like what motivates you. And there's typically three things. Daniel Pink did a lot of work on this. It's purpose, growth, and autonomy. And what's going to make you happy working, a lot is that you're getting better next week than you are today, and you're getting better next month than you are today. And it's hard to do that if you're doing the same kind of projects over and over and over. And it's hard to do that if you're solving the same problem. So as a leader, one of the big things is to, and I always advocate rehiring your team. If you don't know what to do with your annual reviews or your 6-month reviews, then talk to your team as if you are hiring them again and find out, what are they excited about now? What are they going home and playing with? What is motivating them in that way? And then see if you can't tilt or move them or change their jobs a little bit to keep them engaged. Because I think it's something that we all have naturally. It just doesn't always align with our jobs. So I think getting the job to align with it is one piece of it. The other piece of growth mindset is just the opposite of a growth mindset is a fixed mindset. And, the fixed mindset kind of thinks that we're born smart or not. There's nowhere to improve. Or a growth mindset is that we do have areas to improve. And we often believe, if I say, hey, we often believe intellectually that we can grow and get better, but we often respond emotionally like we can't. Mm-hmm. So if like you've been sitting in a meeting and you won't raise your hand and ask a question because there's something you don't know and you feel like you should know it, in emotionally like, oh, I can't ask that question, I'm going to look stupid, right? It's a growth mindset will let you recognize that emotional response and ask the question anyway. Right. So that's really kind of the other side of a growth mindset, is to say, I'm going to acknowledge when I don't know something and make sure that I learn it. It's more important that I learn something than I not feel stupid for asking a question, right? That's one example, kind of a growth mindset as well.
Yeah. How much of that, like, being that you kind of work with different leaders in different areas, do you see that stronger in tech? Because I know for me, it's like your ego kind of creeps up and you feel like, well, if someone says an acronym, I remember the first time I was in a conversation where someone said SD-WAN. I never heard of SD-WAN. This is, a few years ago. Yeah. And I was like, what is SD-WAN? And I thought, well, SD cards are secured. I know what SD card is. Maybe that, and it was stupid to even put those two together. But I didn't want to ask, what is SD-WAN? I just kind of thought, well, I can kind of figure this out. And obviously, I probably looked stupid during the meeting talking because I didn't stop and ask the question of what this is. I went back and Googled it and then realized how stupid I probably looked during that meeting. But how much of that is ego? And do you see that more often in tech than other places?
So tech is weird because it's one of my favorite questions to ask people is when you're making decisions like around what technology you use, when you're making decisions on how you do something or whatever, are you trying to impress your boss? Or are you trying to impress your teammates? And there's this thing, I think, in tech where there's almost, the competition. You want to know the most. You want to be this, you want to feel like the smartest. And it goes back to, again, as we're kids, we're rewarded for being the smartest. We're rewarding for having the answers. We're rewarded for, being the team captain in the in the various academic challenges, right? So we kind of want to be the best. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of wired into us from a very young age. But I do think in tech, there's that extra little thing of, I want my solution to be the coolest. I want everybody to be, to really be impressed by what I do. And I do tend to see, I think that is a little bit bigger in some tech. But I think you go a lot of different places and you'll see it, right? There's some people that are really competitive. Some people aren't. I think some industries draw, some aren't. But it is one of the big things that we have to get over when we go into leadership, though, right? It can't be us being the hero anymore, right? We can't be the hero of the story, right? We have to let the team be the hero of the story and let the people be the people bringing the solutions, not, the leader bringing the solutions. So I think it is a little bit bigger in tech, and it's a little bit harder to break through, in leaders as well.
Yeah, I know for me, it was one of those things where I had a mentor, which I recommend everybody get a mentor or a coach or somebody to help them along the way, because you need that, right? You can't do this on your own, or you might, maybe some people can, but I couldn't. And my mentor was telling me that it's no longer, he's like, your successes don't come from the things that you do. Your successes now come from your teams and what your team does. And if you can praise, if someone on your team excels, then that shows on you.
Yep.
And you may think that you excelling is what people are looking at, but it's not. He's like, the CEO and the other executives, they don't care about what you do. They care about what your team does. And if your team is doing well, it reflects highly on you. Yep. So, when that shifted in my head a little bit and I was able to think, well, how can I grow my team? How can I develop leaders on my team? How can my team become the best team that they can be, and stop thinking about myself? Then everything kind of, the rewards came to me, and it's one of those things where you have to switch that mindset where it's no longer about my individual performance. It's about my team's performance.
Yep. Yeah. How do I put my team in the best situation where they can be successful and have the biggest impact? Right. And it's about setting a clear vision. It's about making sure they're clear on standards and trade-offs. It's about, challenging them appropriately. It's about, making sure that the code of conduct is healthy. It's about making sure there's accountability both from you, but also within the team. So it's a lot of those things that are now, leaders have to figure out what those are and how to do those things so that they can get the results from working through others instead of doing all the work themselves. And it's challenging, but it's fun. Like to me, it's a lot more fun to see the excitement and the joy in my team. Like when they solve a big, tough problem, like early on, I would just jump in and say, here's the solution, right? Here's a solution, go do it, right? Now it's like, if it takes them 2 or 3 days to figure something out and I know the solution after 2 hours, I just let them go for 2 or 3 days because I want them to be so excited. I want them to be that excited and to get that win for themselves, right? It's fun for me to see them do that, but it also keeps them motivated. It keeps them coming back. It keeps them wanting more. So it's a big shift, but it's important.
So what are some ways that we can help build our team? I know you do a lot with education. You obviously, create courses and learning opportunities. What are some things, and some people gravitate to self-starting and wanting to learn and wanting to get in there, and other people on your team don't. You kind of have to encourage them. What are some things you can do as a leader to kind of help develop your team?
Well, I think you have to make it important. You have to set aside time, right? You have to, you have to make it a priority, and it's hard because there's so many other competing priorities in a lot of situations. Again, it's one of those things. If you're not sure what to do with your one-on-one meetings, if you're not sure what to do with a semi-annual, annual review, those are good opportunities to kind of sit back and help your team make, growth plans. How do they want to be different in 6 months? What are they going home and playing with? What are they interested in? And again, can you tilt yourself to better match where they're going naturally? Some people just aren't wired that way, and and it's okay. You just kind of have to figure out who is, and then for some that aren't wired, I think it's important to say, some of the things I've been able to do in the past is to say, here are some things that I can see that we're going to be doing in a year. Do you want to work on this, or do you want to keep doing what you're doing? And just, really kind of put out some of those things and let them know some things that are coming down the pipe that I think could be interesting for them if they want to spend some of their time getting better and growing and learning and just becoming the person who can tackle those problems.
Yeah. I know, our company, we implemented LinkedIn Learning, gave everybody accounts to LinkedIn Learning. And I didn't, at first, I was like, well, I know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to let my own team kind of come up with their own training plans and see what classes they're taking. And we'll talk about it during one-on-ones. And, I waited about a month, maybe a month and a half before I even brought it up that, and come to find out, I had like one person on my team that had taken any classes whatsoever. Everybody else just kind of oh yeah, we got it, whatever. And it wasn't until like, I was like, well, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? And then I have one guy says, well, I'm interested in like ethical hacking. Okay, well, here, let me go pick some classes on ethical hacking. Next one-on-one comes, didn't pick anything. Well, why not? I get busy. I had this thing going on. I had this project and this priority and this thing and this thing. Okay. And it really takes a leader kind of, like you said, setting aside time and saying, this is now a priority for you to learn. And we're going to give you, X number of hours per week that are just dedicated to learning. And then not just set aside time, but I think also holding the accountability of saying, show me what you've learned. Mm-hmm. And I think you in one of your, I was watching some of your courses and things, you had something about that growth comes from, I forget the actual numbers, 10, 20, or maybe it's 20, 10, 20, 70. Yeah. And I think 70 was through experience. Yep. and working through that. So one of the things I was like was, okay, well, how can we take this knowledge that you watched in a class and apply it? Now, what can we do? Where can we get that experience? And that was the way that I was able to kind of figure out how to get my employees to apply what they've learned and actually learn it and actually retain it.
Yeah. So I said the other thing I was going to bring up is the third lesson in this series is what I call wayfinding, and it's intended more for leaders, but there's also some pieces in there that are very helpful, I think, for all teammates. And its idea is that everybody should adopt a cycle of either monthly or quarterly where they plan their learning. And there's a handful of exercises that kind of help people establish what are my goals for my career, both long-term, midterm and short-term. Really sit down and answer those questions of where do I want to be in a year? How do I want to be different in a year? And so there's that aspect of it, but then there's also some exercises that help identify topics. And some of those are, unique to tech, like the scorecards are one of the exercises that go through the scorecards and look for areas where you want to improve. But some of those other things that are in there, some of those other exercises, are really applicable for anybody in any point in their career. So there's some tools there that I have unfortunately not been able to get to a point in my last job. We were just so hammered and so head down on stuff that I wasn't really able to do. But that was one of my goals in my last role, was to take those things and get my team on at least once a quarter, meet with them and say, what's your plan? And work through some of those exercises with them. Because there are some things helpful that will help them surface the topics that are meaningful to them.
So what are some of your goals when it comes to Jump Coach? This is a new venture for you. So what are some of the goals that you want to see come from this long term?
Well, I mean, it's really pretty big. I mean, my goal in this is to grow 1 million leaders in the next 3 years, right? That's why it's not behind a paywall. It's pay what you can. I'm not out there charging, even saying what to charge for it. I don't expect a large percentage of people will pay for it. I just want them to use it. I just want them to grow and get better. If you look at studies of companies and executives, it's like one of their biggest challenges forever is they just don't have enough leaders. They don't have enough people in their organization that can work through others to get things done. And there are initiatives they can't tackle. There are things they can't do. And it holds back all of our organizations, all of our nonprofits, all of our civic organizations. There's just this lack of leadership. And if we can fix that, like if we can take becoming a good leader and shrink it from being a 10-year thing to a 10-day thing, then I really think it can have a pretty big impact. So yeah, my goal with this is quite large. Exactly how I build a business out of it, I don't know. It's a social enterprise, so I'm not, I'm not trying to maximize my revenue per student. I'm trying to help as many people as I can, and then I'll figure out some of the business stuff as I go. But yeah, it's what I want to tackle. It's what I want to spend the next 10 or 15 years tackling, and so yeah, that's really where I want to focus a good chunk of my energy going forward.
So do you see this as growing from virtual to in person, or is it already doing that, or is it just going to be virtual only, or what do you see long term?
I think the vast majority of people who go through it are going to go through the lessons as they are. Yeah. So basically what there are is 3 lessons and 3 development assignments per lesson. So it's really intended to be done over about a 10-week period, but you can stretch that out over a year if you want to. But I expect most people will go through that, and that's going to be their largely their experience. I do think that there are going to be some, I continue to do some coaching. I'm already doing some coaching with it around it. And then working directly with some companies in some areas is that. So primarily though, it's written and intended for people to be able to do it self-paced and self-directed, because that's ultimately what you have to become. Like if you're going to be a leader, you have to become self-paced and self-directed. You have to be able to drive your own and guide your own, development over your career. And that's really what this tries to help them do.
Yeah, I think that's a lofty goal, but I definitely think it's obtainable. No doubt to get that many leaders. When you look at those are the biggest weaknesses that I see in companies, and is that you have great technical talent, but you're right, is a huge lack of leadership. And even if I teach, part time at Winthrop University, and there's not a whole lot of leadership teaching that goes on.
Yeah.
The only way people learn leadership is when they get out there and, through experience and through necessity. And then occasionally there's, a course here or there that they bump into and figure out, hey, this is a good way to do it. Or they get a mentor that really has gone there before and can help guide them. So it is a challenging thing. I can definitely see the advantages of that.
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, the majority of people that have reached out to me as early adopters of this are people with MBAs or people with advanced degrees. And it's like they got an MBA thinking they would learn how to lead, and they realized they didn't. Right. So they're the most active out there searching for leadership training, because it's different than management, right? It's leadership is working through others to get there, and it's a really hard thing to do, right? So so yeah, a lot of my early adopters have been people with advanced degrees that had gone off seeking that leadership training. So yeah, it's 10-20-70 is interesting. Let me touch on that real quick. The idea again is 10% of your learning is about consuming information. It's about listening to Scott talk for an hour, right? But then 20% is interacting with your peers and talking about it and just thinking about it and really kind of stewing on it. And then 70% of your learning is really about getting experience. And experience can be teaching. I think one of the best ways to get experience is to teach something. So that's a part of what we do with, in some of the development assignments with these lessons is, it's the idea is you're going to teach a teammate about emotional intelligence, and that's going to help you learn emotional intelligence. So it can be, it's 10, 20, 70, but that 70% is, how do I get experience, or how do I really dig deeply enough into it to teach even the basics of it to somebody else? And it is what will help people grow and get better. And it's kind of the foundation of a lot of what's in the lessons.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see those numbers as being accurate for me. I know, I even tell people when I read a book, I got books right here, or listen to a book, I hope to retain 10%. That's a good number for me. And if I can take that 10% and talk about that 10%, I may apply a tenth of what I remembered, and then that's a win for me. And when you talk about how you talk to your peers, and that's where I do a lot of my learning. When I go to a conference, I'm not there necessarily to sit in the sessions. I'm there for what I call the track between the sessions, to meet the people, to spend time. I try to book myself every other session. I'm going to be out in the lobby or wherever in the hallway, at the snack bar, talking to someone, trying to figure out what they're working on. What are they doing that's successful at their company? How are they managing projects? How are they managing people? What does their one-on-ones look like? Do they do one-on-ones?
Yeah.
And I pick up so many little things that are game changers for me. Like, for me, walking one-on-ones have been, a huge difference, because when people come into your office, for some reason, they're less likely to open up and talk to you.
Yeah.
I guess it's an intimidating place. I think I have orange wall. I mean, I got a nice office. It's not intimidating.
Yeah.
I got video games in the corner, but for some reason it's intimidating. But if we go outside and we're walking around the pond, and the dynamics completely changed, and now I'm more or less like a friend, and they can tell me things that they might not tell me in the office.
Yeah. You go from your space to a neutral space.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's actually, there's a handful of learning hacks that I think are really interesting to learn. One of them you mentioned there's really the base of what's called spaced repetition, or the forgetting curve. Like the first time you're exposed to something, you're going to forget it, fairly quickly, but the second time it takes you longer, and third and fourth. So that's also one of the things that kind of build into if you can become more strategic about your learning, both what you study and how you study, then you can actually learn faster and retain more. And again, some of those learning science pieces are some of the things that I've, try to build in and try to share and try to teach, because I think they're very interesting. That's like when I was working in my last job, which was medical education. It's like, how do you better educate the world's medical doctors? You kind of learn some of those things, and I try to take some of those things and apply them to what we're doing, and share them with people too, just because I think they're interesting to learn, especially for people who are very, very much interested in learning, like learning how to learn better. So
and that was one thing I know when I was trying to really get into leadership and learning, and trying to memorize as many things as I could and figure out things. And I had to figure out what my learning style really was, because, some people, they can read a book and just have it. I can't. I just can't. But I can listen to something, and for some reason it just clicks. It's one of those things where if I listen to it and do it, if I take what I hear and I try to apply it, like I'll open up a YouTube video, but I won't watch it. I'll just have it on the background while I'm doing what they're saying to do. And it just clicks for me for some reason. But it took me, probably 20 years to figure out that.
Yeah. And it's like some personalities, like my personality is like kind of a dot connector is what I do. So I like to study multiple things at once. There's a concept called interleaving, where you're studying multiple topics at the same time, because it helps you kind of connect those dots. So for somebody like me with my personality, that is an approach that I try to make sure to do. Like I seek out those opportunities to really do that. Yeah. So I think it's just one of those things that you need to experiment with and get better. But just again, it's kind of like it's the awareness, right? You have to be aware of it to even begin to experiment. And so much of this stuff is hidden and buried, and unless you just run across the right thing, you don't even know what they are. So that's really one of the big things we're trying to do, is just here's the map of New York City. Here's all the interesting bits and pieces that you might want to play with. Now go explore the city, right? That's really a good chunk of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. I really think you should teach this like your freshman year of college. This should be like required learning.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And it's again, that's why, when I say I want to grow 1 million leaders, that's why I don't think that's that outlandish because
I don't think so either. I think it's a big number, but it's definitely obtainable.
Yeah, I think because I think it's their skills everybody needs. Like everybody needs these basic leadership skills. So it's that's why I think it's important to do it and to focus so much energy on it, and why I think it can help so many people.
Yeah. And like I said, it's definitely doable. And I'll back you up 100%. And how can people, how can we move people in that direction? How can they find out more about these classes? How can they take them? How can they learn from the things that you're doing?
Yeah, just go to jumpcoach.com. You can get into the training. You can get into, we're putting up some library pieces that just kind of help explain some of the basics. But yeah, I've intentionally kept these things short and accessible. And if you can't pay for them, don't pay for them. If you can contribute to the work, please do. It really does help. But if you can't, that's okay too. I just want people to become better leaders and to feel better about their own leadership abilities. So yeah, just go to jumpcoach.com and you can jump into training, and they're all lunch sized. So there's not a huge commitment to get into it. And then, as you work through it or get questions, obviously reach out. I'm eager to help and answer questions. But yeah, that's the best place. You go to jumpcoach.com and you can get to any other thing I'm getting into, you can get to from there.
Yeah. And I definitely recommend everybody doing it. One thing I really like about your site, by the way, just to sidetrack, the stick figures. I don't know where that came from, but I really like the stick figures. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, the stick man. If anybody's seen David Neal, I think that's his name. He does a lot of stuff similar. And it's funny because I was trying to draw some of these things, and then I tried to hire an artist to draw them. And then I found this guy, I think he's in the Ukraine, who had just this library. And so it's a blend of, but he had some really crazy stuff, just some really funny, it's some funny ones. So I've tried to really inject a little humor into some of these lessons as well. So it's better. A couple people said, it's just so much better than just sitting through a traditional dry leadership training, right? You just don't expect some of the stuff that you run across. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely love the stick figures. And speaking of David Neal, he was on episode 35, and he's doing something. If anybody, just a little plug for him, because I like David a lot. He's been doing these things for probably the past year. It was pre-COVID that he was doing dad jokes on LinkedIn. So if you subscribe to his LinkedIn or Twitter, you'll see that he's got these dad jokes every day. And I show them to my daughter because me and her, we love these little stupid dad jokes. Yeah. So we'll just scroll through LinkedIn and read off a lot of David's jokes. But yeah, definitely like that. And everybody, I'm going to link to Jump Coach on geekleader.com so you can get to it there, as well as your Twitter and your LinkedIn if people want to connect with you and follow you there.
Sounds great.
Scott, man, really appreciate having you on. I love what you're doing for leaders and training people and helping people out, especially those in tech. It's kind of been my passion for the last several years. And next time, let's get you on sooner.
Definitely, man. I'll come back anytime you want me. It's always good to catch up.
All right, good. Talk to you later, man.
All right, man. See you.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some T-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.